Welcome to the January 14th, 2014 meeting of the Westchester Board of Trustees. Because this is the first trustee meeting of the year, it is the annual organizational meeting of the board, and I am convening the meeting as fiscal officer as provided in Ohio statute. In a moment, I'll oversee the nomination and election of the board president and board vice president for the year 2014. But first, the record will reflect that all three trustees are present. Mr. Lang, Mr. Welch, and Mr. Wong, in alphabetical order. First order of business, I open the floor for nomination for president of the Westchester Board of Trustees for 2014. Do we have a nomination?
I nominate George Lang.
I'll second that.
We need no second. Mr. Welch has nominated Mr. Lang. Do we have any other nominations? Hearing none, nominations for board president are closed. Now roll call on the nomination of Mr. Lang for board president for the year 2014. Let's see. Mr. Wong?
Yes.
Mr. Lang?
Yes.
Mr. Welch?
Yes.
Now I open the floor for nomination for vice president of the Westchester Board of Trustees for 2014. Do we have a nomination?
I would like to place in the name of Mark Welch into nomination for vice president for 2014.
Okay, Mr. Lang has nominated Mr. Welch for vice president. Do we have another nomination? Hearing none, nominations for board vice president are closed. Now roll call on the nomination of Mr. Welch for board vice president for the year 2014. Mr. Lang?
Yes.
Mr. Wong?
Yes.
Mr. Welch?
Yes.
Ladies and gentlemen, I am pleased to present Board President George Lang and Vice President Mark Welch.
Thank you. Judy, we don't have a prayer this evening. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Lee. With that, I would like to convene the January 14th, 2014 meeting of the Westchester Township Board of Trustees. Mr. Jones, can you please call the roll?
Mr. Lang?
Yes.
Mr. Welch?
Yes.
Mr. Wong?
Yes.
Would you please stand and join me in the saying of our Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Amen. Thank you, Mr. Roman. Ms. Boyko, first item on the agenda tonight is citizens' comments. At this portion, we limit our citizens' comments to no more than 5, and we ask you to please hold it down to 2 minutes. Those that need more time can do so later in the meeting. We didn't have anybody to sign up. Is there anyone that would like to address the board before we get started? Perfect. Seeing none, we will move on. Presentations are Live the Dream. Ms. Boyko?
Mrs. Barb Wilson, our Director of Integrated Multimedia Marketing, will introduce Mrs. Gail Webster and offer some insight in her event.
Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity today to introduce Gail Webster, a volunteer in our community. She's been very involved and actually was the initiator of the great community celebration we enjoy to celebrate Martin Luther King Day this coming Monday. So I'd like to invite Gail Webster up, and she's been doing this event for 15 years. She has a great team of area volunteers who help support the planning of the event and the activity. She works with Westchester and Liberty Township to put the event together, and Gail will have some great information about Monday's activities.
Hi there. Okay, this year is going to be a really good one, I think. It's our 15th year for the Live the Dream, our Declaration of Unity program, and it's the 12th year for the March for Unity. March for Unity starts at noon at the, used to be the Union Elementary School, now it's Union Day School, right across from the post office. And we go half a mile south down Cincinnati-Dayton Road to Westchester Presbyterian Church. Then we go in there, and all the marchers are treated to a free lunch. This year we've got some wonderful restaurants donating food. some of Westchester and Liberty Township's finest. So I would encourage everybody to come, if not for the march, definitely for the lunch. And there will be the Lakota West Jazz Combo providing entertainment during the lunchtime. So I'd like to encourage the whole community to come out for that. And then in the evening, up at Cornerstone United Methodist Church on Princeton Glendale Road in Liberty Township, is our evening program. And the evening program will be giving out awards to the contest winners. We ran a contest for all 2nd through 12th graders who live within Lakota. And the superintendent will be there to hand out the awards, and we'll hear from each of the contest winners. There will be 6 winners sharing their winnings, sharing what they presented. And the 2 high school principals will be our keynote speakers, our co-keynote speakers. So it should be a really good program. There will be a community choir. Anybody who likes to sing, who'd like to be a part of that choir, can come on Friday night at 6 o'clock, Cornerstone Church, for the one and only practice. We would love to have anybody join who would like to be a part of that. And I'd like to tell you about one other thing that is an outgrowth of our Live the Dream program. For the past 4 years now, this will be the 4th year, a resident of the community who is a history buff and who loves to do research and has researched a topic and presented it at the library during Black History Month. And this year it's going to be on February 25th, a Tuesday night at 7 at Midpoint Library in Westchester. The topic will be Fighting to be Equals, the African American Soldier in the Civil War. And I would also encourage you to come out to that. It's an outgrowth of our Live the Dream program. So you're all welcome to come. Everything's free, and the whole community's invited. Thank you.
Thanks, Gail. This has been a tremendous event in our community that Ms. Webster has been doing for many years now, and every year it just keeps getting bigger and bigger. I remember when my daughter was 10, who's with us tonight, we marched in this, and it just keeps getting bigger and bigger, and great way to create memories, and we appreciate everything you do for our community, Gail. Thanks. With that, I'll move on to action items. I would, Ms. Bushel, let's talk about item B, motion to set dates for 2014 trustee meetings.
Sure. Generally, it has been the practice of the Board of Trustees to conduct your regular business meetings on the 2nd and 4th Tuesdays of the month. That schedule is being proposed for 2014, except you'll note some exceptions in November and December. Because the 2nd Tuesday falls on the election day, and the 4th Tuesday falls on very close to the Thanksgiving holiday, we are recommending or suggesting that the board may want to consider conducting one meeting in November, which is the 3rd Tuesday, and the 1st and 3rd Tuesdays in December.
Thank you, Ms. Boyko. I'll entertain a motion that we hold our monthly meetings for 2014 as we have in the past on the 2nd and 4th Tuesday of each month, beginning at 6 o'clock, with modifications being in November. We would meet on Tuesday, November 18th at 6 o'clock, and in December on December 2nd and December 16th at 6 o'clock.
Also move.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. Discussion? Roll call, please, Mr. Jones.
Mr. Lang?
Yes.
Mr. Welch?
Yes.
Mr. Wong?
Yes.
Ms. Boyko, item C, trustee meeting minutes. Actually, I don't think we need your help here. I will entertain a motion that we approve trustee meeting minutes for October 22nd, 2013.
Mr. Lane, I received all these three minutes a few days ago, and I need some time to review it.
Okay.
I requested that we hold it off to the next meeting.
Okay. You just got them a few days ago?
That's correct.
How could I get mine so far in advance? I've had mine for about 10 days.
Now, I believe they were distributed on Thursday. Or
Thursday.
Saturday. I think it was even Saturday. Thursday.
Regardless, if you need more
This
time,
is
I'll
about
help.
Wednesday evening.
This is about 3 months old, these minutes, and I just received it a few days ago.
Yep.
respectfully requested that.
Yeah. I don't have a problem with that, Ms. Welch.
I have no problem with that.
All right, we will table and I'm assuming, Mr. Wong, you mean for November 12th and December 13th as well?
Yes,
Okay. We will table those until our next meeting.
thank you.
Ms. Boyko, requisitions, 2,500 and above?
3 requisitions for the board's consideration. We have a Frost Brown Todd LLC legal services through November 30th, 2013. These are for various departments, the amount of $31,163.43. Fire Department is requesting a purchase of repairing a self-contained breathing apparatus piece of equipment from Warren Fire Equipment Incorporated, $3,726. And to reimburse a fire employee per township policy, Assistant Chief Rick Prince, at the amount of $2,571.75.
I'll entertain a motion. We approve items 1 through 3.
So move.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. Discussion. Mr. Jones, roll call, please.
Mr. Lang?
Yes.
Mr. Welch?
Yes.
Mr. Wong? Yes.
We have no personnel items. Moving on to business items. Ms. Boyko, item 4.
The majority of your business items are conducting as part of your organizational meeting, the continuation of township volunteer services, committees, and boards, and the assignment of those volunteers to those respective boards. A memorandum is explained as part of your packet, and then also a listing of all of those committees and the volunteers that are assigned to those.
I will entertain a motion to continue township volunteer services, committees, and boards.
So move.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. Discussion. You know, we couldn't operate without these boards, and I believe just about everyone, if not everyone, does it on a voluntary basis. So for everyone not getting paid while you're volunteering for the township, we certainly appreciate your efforts. Mr. Jones, can you call the roll for us, please?
Yes, sir. Mr. Lang?
Yes.
Mr. Welch?
Yes.
Mr. Wong?
Yes.
Ms. Boyko, item 5.
Item 5, 6, and 7 are appointments. As Westchester Township representatives, the Board of Trustees must appoint to these respective committees and or boards. The first is a motion to appoint one trustee as the Westchester Township representative to the Butler County Emergency Management Agency Advisory Council. This is the introduction of the item. If the board's motion could contain the dates of the term, that would be great.
I'll entertain a motion to appoint one trustee as a Westchester Township representative to the Butler County Emergency Management Agency Advisory Council with a term effective January 1, 2014 through December 31 of 2014.
I would nominate Mr. Lang to the EMA board.
I have a nomination for Mr. Lang.
I'll second that.
I have a nomination and I have a second. Discussion? Mr. Jones, roll call, please.
Yeah, Mr. Lang?
Yes.
Mr. Welch?
Yes.
Mr. Wong?
Yes.
Thank you. Ms. Boyko, item 7.
A board's consideration to appoint one trustee as the Westchester Township representative to the Butler County E911 Planning Committee. And again, if the motion can contain the dates of the term.
I'll entertain a motion for, and this is actually item 6, to appoint one trustee as a Westchester Township representative to the Butler County E911 Planning Committee effective January 1st, 2014 through December 31st, 2014.
I'd like to be on that board, if you don't mind.
So I have a nomination for Mr. Wong.
Yes.
Do I have a second for that?
Yeah, I'll second that.
Okay. Discussion? I was actually going to nominate you for that, Mr. Welch.
Oh,
So, but that's if you want to vote for that, that's fine.
I withdraw my second then.
You want to withdraw your second?
Yeah, because if there's a board that I could be on, I would really like to be on the 911. We've discussed this a little bit in the past when I was campaigning, and it meets quarterly on the second Friday, and I would just enjoy being on that board.
Do I have a
And the
second then
committee.
for Mr. Wong's nomination? I have no second, so I will make a motion that we appoint Mark Welch to that board. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Discussion? Roll call?
Mr. Lang?
Yes.
Mr. Welch?
Yes.
Mr. Wong?
Yes.
Item 7, Ms. Boyko.
Appoint one trustee as the Westchester Township representative to the Ohio, Kentucky, Indiana Regional Council of Government Board of Directors. And again, if the motion can contain the term of the appointment.
I'll entertain a motion that we appoint one trustee as our township representative to the OKI Board of Directors for 2014.
I will nominate Mr. Welch.
Have a nomination for Mr. Welch?
I'll second that.
All right, I'll have a nomination and a second discussion. Ms. Roman, I was going to actually nominate you for that. Is that not a position that you would like?
No.
Okay. We have a nomination. We have a second. Any further discussion?
I'm pleased to be on this Regional Council of Governments, the OKI Board of Directors. I think it'll be a great experience for me, and I look forward to being a part of it.
Well, it's actually a very, very important of the three boards, perhaps the most important. You really are going to have to learn to work regionally with other leaders, not just from Southwest Ohio, Kentucky, and Indiana as well. It's a very important board, and I think it'll be a great experience for you. Mr. Jones, roll call, please.
Mr. Lang?
Yes?
Mr. Welch?
Yes.
Mr. Wong?
Yes.
Mr.
Ms.
President?
Boyko, item 8.
Sorry, Mr. President, regarding number 7, I just wanted to note for the record that although it's not required as part of a motion, that we do have an alternative to the Board of Directors, OKI Board of Directors, and that is our staff representative, Mr. Mike Gingling. Doesn't require to be a
I don't think we
motion.
have any problem. Mike's been doing that for years, and you don't need a formal
No,
motion
sir.
on that. But yeah, I assume there's no concerns with that. Perfect. Ms. Boyko, item 8.
Item 8, as representatives to the Butler County Transportation Improvement District, Westchester is allowed 2 representatives because of our population, and previously has been the township administrator and a resident appointment of Mrs. Kathy Carsey. She is a civil engineer, and her insights for infrastructure, roadway improvement, and engineering projects is very helpful as part of the contribution to the discussion of the TID. So there is a motion at the board's consideration if you'd like to reappoint myself as the administrator and the Westchester resident, Kathy Carsey, to the Butler County Transportation Improvement District. And this term is effective for 2 years, so it would be January 1st, 2014 through December 31st, 2015.
I'll entertain a motion to reappoint Township Administrator Judith Boyko and Westchester resident Kathy Carsey to the Butler County Transportation Improvement District Board with a term running January 1st, 2014 through December 31st, 2015.
Also move.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. Discussion. Roll call.
Mr. Lang?
Yes?
Mr. Welch?
Yes.
Mr. Wong?
Yes.
Ms. Boyko, item 9.
Item 9 is a statutory resolution for the board's consideration in order to effectuate the township administrator's recently extended employment agreement, which was approved by the then Board of Trustees at its December 17th, 2013 meeting. Statutory resolution number 01-2014 is required.
I'll entertain a motion that we approve item 9.
Also move.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. Discussion. Mr. Jones, roll call, please.
Mr. Lang?
Yes.
Mr. Welch?
Yes.
Mr. Wong?
Yes.
Ms. Boyko, item 10, please.
Consideration for the board not to object to a liquor permit transfer from Thomas & King Incorporated, doing business as Applebee's Neighborhood Grill and Bar, to RMH Franchise Corporation, doing business as Applebee's Neighborhood Grill and Bar, 6084 Mulhauser Road. This particular franchise has been sold as part of a collection of 37 other Applebee locations, and so it's part of a business model or a business transfer.
I'll entertain a motion that we not object.
So move.
I second that.
I have a motion and a second. Discussion. Roll call, please, Mr. Jones.
Mr. Lang?
Yes.
Mr. Welch?
Yes.
Mr. Wong?
Yes.
Ms. Boyko, item 11, please.
Another liquor permit transfer consideration, a not to object for a liquor permit transfer from Golden Chain Corp. to Sadhavini Incorporated, doing business as Kadai, 9536 Cincinnati Columbus Road, and this is a transfer of ownership as well.
I'll entertain a motion we not object.
Also move.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. Discussion. Roll call.
Mr. Lang?
Yes.
Mr. Welch?
Yes.
Mr. Wong?
Yes.
Mr. President, point of order, I apologize. The support staff just acknowledged that there was an omission on the agenda, motion to pay bills, which normally occurs in the earlier part of the meeting, so I do apologize for that, but if the board could pass a motion to pay bills.
Who caught that?
The one that drafted it.
Good job. I'll entertain a motion that we pay bills.
So move.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. Discussion. Roll call.
Mr. Lang?
Yes.
Mr. Welch?
Yes.
Mr. Wong?
Yes.
Perfect. At this point, we're at the portion of our meeting for first readings of resolutions. We do not have any first readings, so we'll go straight to citizens' comments. Any citizens that would like to approach the board, or business owners or property owners? Mr. Morris and Mark, I was told that you had a thumb drive.
Yes.
That we don't know if we can play or not.
We've
We've got it.
we are a little concerned about bringing in any information or any
Media.
thank you media that we haven't been able to check for viruses and stuff like that. But the IMM department said that they've.
So in the future, if anybody wants to do that, try to get the device to us early so we can check it in
Yes,
advance.
sir. Thank you very much.
All right. Mark, if you can start with your name and address, please.
Mark
For the
Morrison,
record.
876 Eagleview Drive. I want to thank everyone for letting me speak tonight. I want to pick up where Catherine Stoker left off at the last meeting on her way out. It's obvious to me and many others that the new board has some unfinished business. A lot of people noticed the hypocrisy of her and her supporters in the audience, asking that action be taken against Mr. Jones for sending an email to people before the election holding Catherine Stoker and Lee Wong accountable. She claimed the information she emailed was confidential, but yet she then turned around and took the same email and resent it to countless people along with her rebuttal, with nothing in the email redacted from Mr. Jones's email. Consequently, this board is obligated to take the very same action against Mrs. Stoker that it did against Mr. Jones. This board needs to vote to have the law director refer Mrs. Stoker to the Butler County Prosecutor's Office as well as the Ohio Ethics Commission. While researching my talk tonight, I discovered some possible wrongdoings as well in other instances. I understand when the law director sends the board his opinion that they're considered confidential. I have here one clip from the August 28, 2012 meeting where Mrs. Stoker reads directly from an opinion from the law director. In fact, Catherine Stoker starts by reading the opinion. And
in the email we got from, let me see if I have it, from Don Crane with respect to meeting
We can make
minutes.
recommendations, but I think the fiscal officer,
No,
he doesn't report to us.
no, he is an independent,
That he reports to the people.
independent individual, and what it says is, I have it in here. Basically, what happens is, and if you give me a minute, I can find it. If in a home rule township such as we are, okay, here we are. The minutes of the meeting should be presented at the next regular meeting of the Board of Corrections after the previous minutes have been read by the fiscal officer of the board. Absolutely. In the email we got from, let me see if I have it, from Don Crane with respect to meeting
We can make
minutes.
recommendations, but I think the fiscal officer,
No,
he doesn't report to us.
no, he is an independent,
That he reports to the people.
independent individual, and what it says is, I have it in here. Basically, what happens is, and if you give me a minute, I can find it. If in a home rule township such as we are, okay, here we are. The minutes of the meeting should be presented at the next regular meeting of the Board of Corrections after the previous minutes have been read by the fiscal officer of the board. Absolutely. In the email we got from, let me see if I have it, from Don Crane with respect to meeting
We can make
minutes.
recommendations, but I think the fiscal officer,
No,
well, that's their system, not mine. What you saw, it must be an opinion written sometime before that August meeting. The thing that we don't know is if what she read was confidential or not. Therefore, Mrs. Boyko, I'm publicly requesting a copy of that opinion if it is not confidential. However, if it is confidential, then this board, by Catherine Stoker and Lee Wong's own standards, need to have Mrs. Stoker's actions referred to the Butler County Prosecutor's Office as well as the Ohio Ethics Commission. Maybe Mrs. Boyko can answer yes or no if that opinion was confidential. And by the way, Mrs. Boyko, I recall in Mrs. Stoker's email that she said everyone has the right to see the legal invoices. Well, I requested legal invoices back in August of 2013. I've yet to receive them. And lastly, here's another clip where Lee Wong is reading from a legal opinion at the June 26, 2012 meeting. And how do I pull this up again? Since this is your system.
Do we have an 8th grader in the house? They're far better at technology than I am.
That says cancel.
Justin to the rescue.
Yeah.
So now you need this one.
Right.
Don't you dare. I just paused it, so.
You'll have to talk to them about getting better speakers. Because apparently it's all the way up.
Okay? That right belongs only to the actual members of the entity, which in this case are the township trustees. Although the fiscal officer has duty to keep accurate and detailed minutes of meetings, their obligation does not extend to executive sessions, because detailed and accurate minutes are not required to be kept of those sessions. So when there's a need to know, we will invite you in there. The township fiscal officer, this is from the legal opinion,
Is it?
has no legal right to attend executive sessions. Okay? That right belongs only to the actual member.
I'll have to figure out how to get it out of there. So again, we don't know, this legal opinion that he read, we don't know if it was, a confidential one or not. And it's from the June 26, 2012 meeting. If it's not confidential, then I'm publicly, once again, requesting a copy of that opinion as well. However, if it is confidential, then the board needs to refer Mr. Wong to the county prosecutor and the Ohio Ethics Commission. And Mr. Wong, you need to tell everyone whether you hold yourself to the same standards you have held Mr. Jones to, or do you believe that you should be give yourself special treatment? Everyone will be awaiting your answer by your vote. And Mr. Lang, in the interest of accountability and just plain fairness, people will be expecting you to motion to have the law director refer Mrs. Stoker and possibly Mr. Wong to the prosecutor and ethics commission. Mrs. Boyko, people will be awaiting your answer as to whether or not those opinions are confidential or not. And then finally, the troubling thing about this whole issue isn't just the hypocrisy, but the fact that Mrs. Stoker and Mr. Long did these things long before Mr. Jones. So they have set a standard, but yet they admonish him for doing the very same thing. We look forward to this board addressing the unfinished business tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Morris. Anybody else like to come before the board this evening? You could lead with your name and address for the record, please, Mr. Clark.
My name is Stephen Clark. My address is 7392 St. Ives Place, Westchester, Ohio. I have a question. If this goes to court and if Mr. Jones ends up having to defend himself, will he be paying for that, or will the township have to take care of his legal fees? Is anybody aware of the answer? What would occur there? I can wait for an answer. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll address that during trustee comments.
Thank you.
Any other citizens who would like to approach the board tonight? Please come on up. Susan, if you can lead with your name and address for the record, please.
May I move the podium this way? Teasing. No, on a positive note, we've got a Boy Scout troop here from St. Anne's Church, and I want to welcome them. And I also told them you all were my friends and that they were more than welcome to come down and talk to you.
Thank you, Susan. Anybody else like to approach the board this evening?
Sure, address.
Anybody else like to approach the board? Last call? Seeing none, we will close citizens' comments, and we will move on to second readings, of which we don't have any, and we will move to discussion items and trustee comments. Ms. Boyko, you wanted to discuss the Smith Road connector?
I think by the title of the entry under discussion items from assigned to me, probably people are thinking, well, where has she been? What's going on? No, I believe I'm aware of the individual positions of the now Board of Trustees. However, before canceling the project, I want to make sure that I'm following any change to direction, and I think that does require some public discussion. And additionally, because staff has kept the affected property owners' status of the project, I think it's only as a courtesy to notice them if this project is no longer going to be continuing. So just as a very brief summary, as the board is aware, last year under the direction of a different Board of Trustees, the Smith Road connector was discussed, and a majority did direct it as a township project. And so the latter part of last year, staff had worked with the Butler County Engineer's Office to design preliminary engineering, construction, and final engineering, and then construction drawings for the project. And so it is prepared and ready to be bidded, should that be the direction of this current board. As you know, that the proposed path is to overlay. There's a multi-purpose path is to connect just west of Beckett Ridge Boulevard, an existing pathway, to just west of State Route 747, which connects a little bit further along Smith Road on the north side. And so I wanted to propose that for board discussion and to direct, if there is a cancellation of this project, we would hopefully that you would present that to me. And then also, just to, as a point of discussion, if the board would like to consider that if you want to cancel the construction of the new portion of this project, would there be any consideration to the board to allow the overlay of a portion of the existing path along the Smith Road portion to be overlaid? The project was constructed privately, and it was constructed by a private entity, and unfortunately the construction did not follow the construction specifications, and so there is a premature disrepair and a faulty construction of the project, and we would like to, since it is existing, either repair it and make the appropriate improvements to it, or candidly remove it, because it will potentially with continued decay, it will be a safety hazard for some of the users.
Mr. Wong, your response to Ms. Boyko?
I would like to see that the Smith Road connector be continue this project, to finish it. We've been talking about this for quite a few years now, and that we talk about funding. That was from TIF funding, and I hope to see that.
Mr. Welch?
I don't believe that this Smith Road connector, this bike hike path, should be part of any spending that we do in the near term. I would like to explore other ways to possibly get the path built, which might be fundraising or some type of business involvement where they would help to pay for the actual path. I agree with you, Mr. Lang, that it's not a core competency, that this bike hike path is going to serve a very few number of citizens, and I don't want to spend the money on it.
Yeah, my position hasn't changed on this at all. The worst thing, in my opinion, government can do is to expand and grow their infrastructure when the private sector is still in recession. And yeah, the private sector is rebounding slightly, but make no doubt about it, we are still in recession. So the worst thing we can do, in my opinion, as a government is to spend money on something that is not a core competency. And the roughly $400,000 to $500,000 for the cost of this asset to build it is going to be a fraction of the cost of the life of the asset. The majority of the cost is going to come many years from now, and we're going to be burdening citizens in the future, and it's going to come in the cost of upkeep and maintenance. So, Judy, I think there are two of us that are saying we do not want to proceed with this project. However, you brought another point up, and that was consideration for improving what is currently there. And I guess I kind of heard of it before, but I've not seen any details. I would be at least open to looking at what those details would look like.
It's always been part of the project, and so there was information that was presented in terms of the requirements.
I guess it was presented as a whole. I'd just like to.
So what I can do is it has been broken out, and I can present that to you. It's about an $80,000 cost for the repair and the overlay, and I can bring that at the board's next meeting.
I'll give consideration for that.
Okay. Thank you very much.
I made a comment. This Smith Road connector is so important for the residents of Westchester that will connect thousands of homes between east and west of Westchester. I think it is a pity that we didn't continue this. We talked about this for over 2 years, and that we have TIP money allotted for it that we can use to build it. And if it is go by private donation, you're never going to see it. So, but I can counter too.
Yeah, and Lee, TIF money is not a magical pot of money. TIF money is still paid for by the taxpayers, and we as trustees are still responsible for how we use those TIF dollars.
Well, this sidewalk, the bike path is a part of infrastructure. Besides driving on the road, sidewalk is a part of infrastructure. May not be important as important as roadways, but it is still moving people from point A to point B. They can walk in our community, livable, walkable. But like I said, I can counter too.
Perfect.
And then,
Do you have anything else, Ms. Boyd?
no, I think because there was a vote to cancel or to direct staff to do it, I think it would be appropriate if I could have a vote to cancel that. That would be very helpful.
So you would like a motion to
Yes, sir.
To stop work on the Smith Road connector?
Yes, sir.
Sure, I'll entertain a motion that we stop work on the Smith Road connector. Do I have a motion?
Also move.
I'll second it. We've already had discussion. Any further discussion? Mr. Jones, roll call.
Mr. Lang?
Yes.
Mr. Welch?
Yes.
Mr. Wong?
No.
Perfect.
And then there's just the last item. I don't know if the board would like to address some of the questions that were rose during the citizens' comment. I will speak with Mr. Morris to understand which staff member to whom he spoke to request those legal or to request the legal opinions, because with proper redactions according to the statute, those legal opinions are a public document, again with the appropriate redactions, and so those should have been delivered to him. And I'd like to know to whom he spoke. I can't imagine that we just ignored a public records request. So.
Okay. Mr. Wong, any other comments?
Yes. It is my vision for 2014 that for Westchester that we have considered building have a performing arts center. I think it is our township is up to the level for arts and culture. I think that's something that we can look at to build for the future of Westchester. And secondly, again, it is my vision. I hope that I'd like to see a light rail system connecting from Westchester to Cincinnati, that people can go to work downtown or entertainment besides just driving the car. They can use another form of transportation. That's all I have.
Any thoughts on Mr. Morris's comments, Lee?
No.
Okay.
Thanks for his comment.
Mr. Welch?
Regarding Mr. Morris's comments, I'd rather be prudent about this and not rash and impetuous, and I need time to think about what Mr. Morris said and to take it up at a later meeting. I need to make an informed decision.
Yeah, I guess my opinion, I'd like to get with the law director, which I would have liked to have done before we moved so quickly last time with the decision against Mr. Jones. I asked for 2 weeks so I can consider it, and I would like to, Mr. Morris has made some serious allegations, and I would like some time to think about it too and talk to the law director. My gut feeling says this is more political. That's just my gut feelings. But I do want to look into it and see if there's anything there. Any other comments, Mr. Welch?
Yes, sir. There are several topics I'd like to discuss that I said I would like to change when I was campaigning. And I'd like the Board of Trustees to consider them and take appropriate action. The first three are regarding zoning. Number one, I disapprove of the practice of accepting anonymous complaints to zoning. As a business owner, I know that anonymous complaints that come into my business can be an ex-employee, they can be a competitor. These types of complaints really have no place in a township like Westchester. They can be frivolous, contentious, and they're quite antagonistic. In fact, what I have found is that in a community, in a neighborhood, they can create strife among neighbors. And this strife would be that somebody makes a complaint against something I just that I have in my yard. I start to wonder who it is. Then I start to ask around. I want a question. And then I ask the person who did it, and they probably lie to me about it. And now I'm thinking, well, okay, I think I know who did this. I think I'm just going to go ahead and, make an anonymous complaint against them. I don't think there's any place in this township for the zoning to accept anonymous complaints. You have a right to face your accuser. And when it's anonymous, you don't have an opportunity. So if it's important enough for somebody to complain about it, then it's important enough for them to leave their name. That's number one. Number two, I'd like the board to consider a motion or a resolution that there would be no legal action taken by the zoning department against Westchester citizens and businesses unless it was first approved by the trustees. To me, it's totally illogical for the trustees to be responsible for the fiscal health of the township when there can be actions that are being taken by the zoning department, whether they're litigating or having to go through litigation because somebody's suing us, before the trustees have an opportunity to act on it. If we can make this happen so that these legal actions aren't taken, we could possibly save tens of thousands of dollars in legal fees in the township. Number three, a few years ago on April 12th, 2011, the board adopted Resolution 062011 that prohibited commercial vehicles to park within the public right-of-way in residential neighborhoods. This resolution lacks specificity and has, in my opinion, been misinterpreted by the zoning department to the harm and detriment of Westchester citizens who are typically self-employed, skilled craftsmen who use their work vehicle for personal use, bringing it home at night, parking in their driveways. Resolution 062011 should either be rescinded or clarified so as not to permit pernicious pursuit by the zoning department after after those who are not in the wrong. So, Resolution 062011 was all about making sure that semi-trucks weren't parking in the right-of-way. And I think that's the spirit of which when Mr. Bierman was up sharing about this resolution, I know you, George, had questioned this. I think you ultimately said, You did not support this.
I actually voted against it.
So I think that this has done harm to a person in particular who I don't think he deserved it. And I'd like to get the staff's input as to the best way to proceed regarding this resolution.
Mark, you brought up three things. Let's take them one at a time and see where Mr. Wong and I are on these three items. One is the anonymous complaints.
The three.
There were three, Lee.
Zoning?
Zoning, okay, so they're all
Anonymous
zoning.
complaints, no legal action, and the resolution 06-2011.
I see. I thought
So Mark has brought up
that
three
was the
things.
same one. Okay.
Mr. Wong, one was anonymous complaints. I brought this up actually about 6 months ago. I don't think that the township should have anonymous complaints for zoning either. Mr. Wong?
Oh, I have no problem. That's right. Anyone's making a complaint, the accused should have a right to face the accuser.
I agree.
So-
Thank you for changing your position on that. I appreciate that. When I brought it up, the vote was 2-1 against me, so I appreciate that. Thank you. So, Ms. Boyko, there's now 3 people saying we do not want to have anonymous complaints on our zoning department. So, is that what you need? You want to make an official resolution? What's the process?
Well, certainly it's at the board's discretion, but I think the best way to effectuate that new policy, that direction, or that change in policy, what I would prefer to do is if we could, just so that we don't have any unintended consequences or misexpectations or misstatements, what I'd like to do is maybe take a week or so and draft a kind of a written policy.
Perfect.
So that you all can digest it, review it, and then necessarily make changes to it. But just to ensure that I'm understanding the expectation and that we're not going to inadvertently address something that you don't wish to be addressed.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you. The second item was no legal action taken by the township without approval of trustees. Mr. Wong, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, this is, we are trading into very serious business here. Zoning is a law that is written. I mean, that's for the public. And that when someone, and then they will have to come to trustee for legal action.
No, not necessarily.
I mean, trustee must approve it
Yes.
for legal action.
Yes.
Or the trustee could work with the zoning department and who they feel is the offender.
Yeah, and this may not even be a public approval. It could be done in executive session.
Yeah, executive session, yes, I could see that.
Yeah.
But if it is done in, that's, I mean, if someone is a political friend of yours and come up, and then that's not going to fly with that. Not right, not going to be fair.
Well, it'd be a
I think
board vote.
fair should be a law that applies to everybody, not for favoritism. I mean, if the law is not fair, yes, we change it, but we need to do a law that is fairly enforced to everyone across the board.
Well, the problem, though, is what is fair, because there's so much interpretation in the code. You know, the code is not very clear on a whole lot of different things. So I think what Mark is saying, and what I brought up several months ago on the same thing, is let the trustees be the arbiter and say, yeah, this is how we interpret the code. But just for our zoning department to be able to take legal action without trustee approval, and plus the other thing, then the buck doesn't stop with us. I want the buck to stop with the trustees. If someone has a problem with action that the township is doing, they need to come to us, not to anybody else. So I support this recommendation.
And that's logical, because if we're ultimately responsible for the township's money and where we spend with legal bills and things like that, then we should be able to have a say as to whether or not a department is going to take action. And like what George says, arbitrate.
Any other thoughts, Mr. Wong?
I would like to think about this and discuss with the law director,
Okay.
and I'll get back to you.
Okay.
Once again, Ms.
little bit
Boyko,
more
there's
time.
2 out of 3 that are saying we would like to proceed with this as well. So same thing, just take a couple of weeks, think of the best way
Okay.
to proceed.
Okay.
Think of the unintended consequences that Mr. Welch may not have considered?
I certainly will. If I should just share very briefly, there actually are 3 areas where something enforcement would elevate to some type of legal action, and they represent either a filing with Area 3 Court, a filing of a lawsuit, or defending a suit that's been charged to the township. And so I would just ask that the board give some consideration to what extent, or are you talking about all 3, and to what extent would you like that approval granted? Because I think whenever we certainly don't file a lawsuit prior to the Board of Trustees approval. Certainly do not file a lawsuit prior to the Board of Trustees approval, and that is done as presented in executive session as statute permits. Area 3 Court, which is the next step of enforcement, it's not a lawsuit, but it is legal action, and currently staff does not go to the Board of Trustees for an Area 3 Court enforcement. And then defending the lawsuits, you are certainly made aware of those suits that they're filed or charged against the township, and they're discussed in executive session. I can't say specifically if there is an opportunity where you formally discuss and have a consensus of it, but we certainly do note and alert you of those legal filings against the township. But so just ask that there's those 3 categories, give some thought to what level and what degree you would like that notification. We certainly want to comply with
Can
the
you
board
summarize
instructions.
that in a brief
I certainly can.
note for us?
Yes, sir.
And we can take a good look at that. I appreciate that. Thanks. Then the last item refers to, Mr. Welch brought up Resolution 06-2011, which I believe was a commercial vehicle, some restrictions on commercial vehicle usage in the township.
Correct.
Obviously, I voted against that when it was brought up to us in 2011, so I would agree with Mr. Welch on this. Mr. Wong, your thoughts?
What was said the regulation again? What was that about?
06-2011 was about commercial vehicles, particularly semi-trucks, that were parking in the right-of-way in residential areas. The whole idea was safety, so that fire and ambulances could get into the various communities, and that these trucks wouldn't be blocking the way.
And my concern was that it would be used against a guy, a landscaper, for example, that's parking his vehicle in the driveway, and that's exactly how it's been used in the township. It's been, enforcement has been taken against people that do not have their vehicle parked in the right-of-way. It's not an 18-wheeler. It's a landscaping truck that an independent contractor is using to support himself and his family. I don't think that was ever the intention of that code.
The parameter that this was
On the
built
private driveway.
That's correct.
Yeah. Now, Ms. Boyko, was that regulation drafted up for park on a public street or private driveway?
If I may, point of order. Resolution, I apologize, I don't know all the registers of the resolutions off the top of my head or their titles, but is the 06-2011 the administration resolution, the statutory resolution that refers to the right-of-way? Or is that the zoning text amendment resolution that initiated the text to implement the commercial vehicle?
It says here, it's the resolution adopting regulations prohibiting commercial vehicles and trailers and recreational vehicles and trailers parking within the public right-of-way in residential neighborhoods and prohibiting placement of portable storage units and dumpsters within the public right-of-way.
Trustee Welch, may I just to confirm?
Please do.
I believe, yes, this is, there are two, the previous Board of Trustees had codified in 2 ways the prohibition of commercial vehicles. One was through this administration resolution 06-2011, which prohibits it in the right-of-way. The other codification was through the zoning text amendment process, where there is actually a section in the zoning code that governs the same, similarly, but on private property. So you have governance of prohibition of commercial vehicles based on the outline of the resolution and the zoning text in 2 ways: public property and private property. I think certainly at the will of the board, of majority of the Board of Trustees, regarding private property, you certainly can initiate a text amendment to the zoning code. Currently, the zoning code states very clearly what is determined to be defined to be a commercial vehicle. If you want to alter that definition, we would need to go through the text amendment process of changing the zoning code. If you want to alter the governance of the prohibition of commercial vehicles in the right-of-way, that is by just rescinding an existing resolution and modifying it to change. I would just caution the board, I believe you need to address them separately, because what is governed or what is permitted on public property right-of-way can be considered very differently than what is considered on private property. The resolution that you referenced, Trustee Welch, regarding the right-of-way, there were some public safety concerns in terms of a commercial vehicle of the size that is defined in this resolution being parked on a public street, and the fire trucks and the public safety apparatus having to navigate and maneuver through those vehicles. So I just ask that the board give due consideration to maybe not lumping them together, but considering them separately, and if it's the same result, your position, then so be it.
I trust your judgment, Ms. Boyko, as to the best way to achieve the outcome.
Right. But I do take issue with one thing you said. You said that in the definition of the zoning resolution, it was a commercial vehicle was clearly defined. And the only way that they defined it was with this width of 84 inches. And there's other ways that you can, we can go to, let me see here 1 second. The Ohio Revised Code addresses commercial motor vehicles, which would even be a better way if we wanted to incorporate that into the language. But there's width and rated capacities, does it include the trailers and that type of thing. So I disagree. I don't think it's clearly stated in the definition. And just as a matter of point, I had the privilege of working on the Zoning Resolution Revision Committee as a co-chair. And we've been going through the zoning resolution for about the last 18 months or so. And very enjoyable. And so I went to start looking into this. I got lost. I couldn't find it. I mean, I couldn't. What happened was a commercial vehicle was defined in the definition section, but then it was referred to in the general provisions and in the residential. So, and I'm not saying, I'm just simply saying that it can get complicated. And even being on this board for as long as I was, trying to find it was very difficult.
So you contest the definition of commercial vehicle, not
Yes.
necessarily that it's not accurately, that it's not defined in the code. Because it is defined in the code. You may not agree with the definition. You may want to define it in some other way, is what I'm hearing you say?
Exactly.
Okay.
May I make a statement that we have a citizens revision board for the zoning. Why don't we have them to look into this particular issue and bring it up to the board, and we can vote on it?
They may or may not be looking into it, but all this committee is going to do is make recommendations. It's up to us to adopt their recommendations, to not adopt, to adopt different recommendations. The buck stops with us, not with this committee. This committee is going to make the recommendations, but we're the ones that are responsible for what the code looks like.
Yes, ultimately, yes.
And I think there's 2 out of 3 of us that say, hey, we want changes to this code. And this committee, Lee, has been working on it for 1.5 years now. I don't know how close they are to being done. I don't know if they're 1.5 years away. But we have residents that are, in my opinion, unduly suffering as a result of this code and how it is being interpreted and applied. And I'm not going to watch our residents suffer while we wait for a committee to finish their work.
Well, this is a very complicated matter in interpretation on the size of the vehicle, what type it is. I really think that Ms. Boyko need bring it up to us first, look at it, and then we can make a decision on it.
I agree.
Right now, maybe mixing all these separate issues together, and it's hard to decipher.
I would say, with research that was done, Anderson Township has a very detailed section on exactly this, as to the definition. And I think that we probably want to make some changes with what they say, but it is specific enough so that the zoning wouldn't make an interpretation that a skilled craftsman or a landscaper or a roofer who has a dually truck that happens, they're always over 84 inches in width. I think they're 90s Fords in their 2014 models. Said that the 2014 dually rear wheel Ford trucks are 96 inches wide. GMCs are 95.9. Semi-trucks are limited to 102 inches, but, you know, that's that would have to be worked out. But my point is that Anderson Township does a much better job of specifying what exactly is a commercial vehicle. And I think we should be able to do these things on the fly. I'm with you, George. I don't think we should wait for the committee to come back. I think if we've noted, and we notice that there are residents and citizens that are being harmed by this, that we should be able to take action on these kinds of things right away and, you know, fix them on the fly. The other stuff can come and we can spend, you know, that might be 6-8 months from now, and then we can adopt those things later.
Right, Mark, I appreciate what you brought up. And I think right now I don't have any documentation in front of me to review, to read about it. Mm-hmm. And based on what you state, I really need time to look at this, okay, to review this carefully, and then make changes appropriately instead of making it on the fly. That may have unintended consequences later on.
Right.
So I requested that to the next meeting, let's bring it up and draft it up. Let's see what it is.
Okay. I just want to make sure I understand the board's direction. Because if you are seeking to change the current text of the zoning code, that has a statutory process you must follow. And that takes anywhere from 3 to 4 months. So we could not change the zoning code. I know you're not referencing it just on the fly, right, but we cannot do that. You cannot administratively change the zoning code. It has to go through the statutory process to do that. But what I'm hearing is that there is some concern on the duration of that process and the immediate needs of constituents that you have voiced some concerns over. So the board may want to consider, is there something that you want to do in the interim to put a moratorium on the enforcement of that matter prior to the formal initiation and completion of the text amendment process? Because as long as the code states it without some formal codified direction from the Board of Trustees, we have a fiduciary and a professional moral responsibility to enforce the zoning code. So if you are asking that element of the code be considered a non-enforced, then I believe it's in the best interest of the community if the board somehow codifies that and does some moratorium on the enforcement of that particular zoning provision. So things for the board to consider as you provide further and clearer direction to me on how you would like to proceed with this and what exactly, I'm not certain what you really want from me for your next meeting. So if you can maybe just let me know, and I'll try to formulate based on what I'm hearing this evening what I think you want, but any further clarification and direction would be very much appreciated.
Yeah, I think you have at least the gist of it, and you can get with Mark and I individually between now and the next meeting and get a little more specificity.
Okay.
And then make some other recommendations to us, what doesn't make sense.
So I certainly will try my best to have something written for you by your next meeting, but in the complexity of the multiple layers and the different geographies of right-of-way versus private property, I just want to make sure that you feel comfortable with the document. So I can try to. I definitely will try to endeavor to have it done next meeting, but certainly we'll have a good framework or skeleton of what potentially you could consider for a future action.
Yep.
Yeah, I think it's important to get started on it.
Okay.
And if you mentioned a moratorium, I don't know if that's a possibility or not, but
I believe it is, but I think that's something we would consult with the law director as part of our due diligence and review.
Okay. Perfect. Thanks, Judy.
Okay, so just in the interim, I hear the majority direction of the Board of Trustees, and that we will endeavor to work with any existing violation in the interim until a more detailed plan is established.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Yep.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Mr. Welch, anything else?
Yes, sir. I promised when I was campaigning that I would recommend to the board that the fiscal officer be permitted into executive session. The fiscal officer is an elected official and has taken the same oath of office that the trustees have taken. And he has promised to uphold both the United States Constitution and the Ohio State Constitution. So I don't see why we would make a judgment against the fiscal officer, I don't care who they are, that they're not capable of going into executive session and hearing things which are attorney-client privilege and keeping their mouth shut. So what I'm asking is that whatever we need to do in order to have the fiscal officer join us in executive session, that's what I'd like to do. And, like we've said it before, there's over 1,300 townships in the state of Ohio. And there's only one that does not permit the fiscal officer to be in executive session.
Mr. Wong?
I think it is not wise for the fiscal officer to be in executive session, particularly when we handle legal matters, because this fiscal officer, Mr. Jones, has violated that's executive session matter, and that he had exposed it to the public during your campaign. And if it is a matter that's pertaining to fiscal matter, yes, by all means, he's been invited in to the meeting.
Mr. Wong, you said Mr. Jones disclosed something in executive session, but he's not allowed, he was barred from executive session for the last year, so how could he disclose
That
something?
was releasing of the matter that we've
But
been discussing.
that wasn't from executive session. He's never been in part of executive
That was
session.
attorney-client privileges.
No. You said he disclosed information from executive session, and he has not been allowed in executive session. My question is, how can he disclose stuff in executive session?
Well, he was in the executive sessions once or twice before, and that
So
there
did
were
he
matters.
disclose something from those meetings?
There was matters that we discussed in the executive session. I don't know where he got it, and he was sending out emails to the public about the legal matters, legal bills.
That was not from executive session. So you're either making an allegation that's unfounded, you're confusing something here, but that was not from executive session.
But I think it is just not wise for a fiscal officer who has no input in legal matters to be in the executive session. But
Well, I would agree with Mr. Welch on this. Mr. Jones was elected as our fiscal officer. He's the watchdog of our money, as every fiscal officer in the state of Ohio is. And over 1,300 townships, we're the only one that has barred the fiscal officer from attending executive sessions. He did attend one last year, the very first one, where we told him he could no longer attend anymore. And then I think we invited him in for one other one. I'm not sure, I'm going back from my memory. Mr. Jones says no, he was not invited back to another one. So I support Mr. Welch. Do we need a formal motion for this, Ms. Boyko?
Candidly, I cannot recall if the board voted to not invite. So I don't believe you did. So I don't believe it's necessary. I think the consensus of the board, majority of the board, is to allow your policy, your practice to the.
Okay.
Unless
So-
can I look at the law director real quickly though to make sure.
Should we pass? Do we need a motion on this, Don?
No.
Okay.
It's in the sound discretion of the board.
Okay. Thank you, Don.
What he said.
Mr. Welch, anything else?
I have one other thing. I'd like to change trustee comments to elected official comments. For the same reasons. The fiscal officer of Westchester Township is an elected official. And, quite honestly, I've sat back in those chairs many, many, many times over the last few years. And in this past year, when the fiscal officer got up from his seat there and in citizen comments had to speak at the podium, I'm thinking this felt a little uncomfortable. Why is the guy sitting at the dais with the trustees having to get up there and speak as a citizen? when he can just stay right there and speak as a elected official.
Mr. Welch, I think you may not be in one of the meetings that we extend a courtesy for him to speak at the dais, but he chose to get up to speak at the podium.
I believe we did do that on a rare occasion.
Mm-hmm.
So,
we did extend it. Am I correct, Ms. Boyko?
Well, I didn't have the direction of the Board of Trustees, but I do very much recall that when Mr. Jones was going to the podium, I did say to him, I'm like, why are you going there? You don't need to go there.
Right.
And I do recall that it was
so
his
you don't
choice.
have a concern then with making
No
fiscal officer,
concern. He
making
always
an
had
elected
the
official
option to
comment?
speak from here on the dais. So it's a non-issue.
Perfect. Thank you, Ms. Swan.
Sir, and I have nothing other than my professional gut impression. Even though the board has never adopted a procedure or policy of your trustee meeting agenda, it has almost been inherently a best practice for the longest time that almost it could be what's that legal term where it's recognized as a policy because it's long-standing so long. So
Yeah.
I think it may just to be wise if the board wants to make a motion to do that, that would be great.
Sure.
So because we basically have to change the agenda to reflect what you're suggesting.
Sure. I will entertain a motion that we change our monthly agenda from discussion items and trustee comments to discussion items and elected official comments. Do I have a motion?
I so move.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. Discussion? Mr. Jones, can you call the roll?
Mr. Lang,
Yes.
Mr. Welch,
Yes.
and Mr. Wong.
Yes.
Mr. Welch, anything else?
I have a couple things that are just not policy change or anything like that. I wanted to say that I've attended in the last couple of days some business openings. One with a good friend of mine, Mike Reed. He does the concealed carry training. He opened his Right to Arms store it's in Liberty Township. Wish we could have had him here, but he's at the corner of Mercedes Drive and Route 4, and he sells guns and he sells emergency provisions and he sells safes for your guns and things like that. So anybody who would who'd be interested in concealed carry or looking at a gun, I highly recommend Right to Arms with Mike Reed. And secondly,
Is that a commercial for him?
no, it's not. He is a friend of mine, and he's a chamber member. He's an ambassador for the
He's a
chamber.
Westchester resident.
He's a Westchester resident. That's right. Okay, so another commercial. I was at Firehouse Subs last night. They opened up. They did their grand opening, and I got to tell you, it was Ron and Sandra Herman. They did an excellent job. It's a beautiful shop. It's right over here off our Union Center Boulevard in the U.S. Bank building. And I had the smokehouse brisket sandwich. It was great. The fire chief, Mr. Goller, he was there. I think he had the Italian sub. So support your local businesses.
Thank you, Mr. Welch. Anything else?
I'm good.
Mr. Jones, do you have any comments?
Oh, my. Dance. Thank you, Mr. Lang and Mr. Welch and Mr. Wong. You can expect to have very few comments in the future, if allowed to. I can't dance, so any comments I have will be on very few occasions. Regarding not being allowed being allowed hereafter into executive session and to speak, I think it's a very positive reflection on this board, their candor and their transparency. And you just got to get this sense they're not trying to hide something, you know. I think it's also a very positive reflection on this board to the extent that they know you vote on the fiscal officer and your understanding of the role and function and how confusing and just wrong it is to change that role and function after you place your vote. I appreciate and respect this board for having expressed their respect for your vote, and that's really what it is. Regarding my participation in executive session, I appreciate the vote of confidence expressed by a majority of the vote in contributions I can make, and just the reasonable conclusion considering my nearly 4 decades of professional experience. I think it's just reasonable to understand the importance of good communication, given the expenditures in the township, and the fiscal officers need to be a party to the executive sessions. That's just need-to-know common sense. And Westchester can now rejoin the common sense community of over 1,300 townships in Ohio. Otherwise, regarding other comments, some of these issues involving myself and now obviously Mr. Wong and Mrs. Stoker, I feel really comfortable about where I'm at. I'm not here because I spend a lot of money at all. No, I put my trust in the people. I trust their understanding of common sense. I trust their ability to recognize overt hypocrisy. And, I just got this feeling that it won't be too long, but what this board will be able to focus on the best interest of the residents of the township, and soon there will be peace. Peace at last, peace at last. Thank God we'll have peace at last, right? So, and otherwise, Mr. Welch, welcome.
Thank you.
And I better say if not more. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. I have 2 comments, actually 2 guests I'd like to introduce. One, we have Mike Campbell with us today from the Butler County Port Authority. Mike, good to have you here today. Good to see you. And the other person I'd like to introduce to everyone is my daughter is home from college. She is a freshman at New York University. She is studying political science. Go ahead, the checks haven't all cleared yet, so don't clap yet. She is studying political science and international business, so Mr. Wong, Mr. Jones, Mr. Welch, maybe you can talk to her about changing her mind on political science. She's a freshman. She can still change her mind. Alicia, I love you. I'm glad you're here tonight. Any other comments?
I have one parting thought. Thomas Jefferson said, "The 2 enemies of the people are criminals and government. So let us tie the second down with the chains of the Constitution, so the second will not become the legalized version of the first." Parting thoughts.
Well, thank you, Mark. With that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn the regular meeting and go into executive session with legal counsel for the purpose of considering and discussing 1, personnel matters, discuss contract negotiations for certain collective bargaining unit, 2, acquisition, sale, or swap of legal property, 3, current and pending litigation. The board will not return. So I have a motion?
Yep. I so move.
I have a motion. I have a second. Discussion? Roll call?
Mr. Lang?
Yes.
Mr. Welch?
Yes.
Mr. Wong?
Yes.
We stand adjourned.